I think it'll take some time before they get into a phase of trying to understand exactly how this happened. If the police could have done something to prevent this, it would seem at first glance that they didn't do a good enough job of securing the perimeter around this parade, which goes through central Berlin and shuts down much of the traffic in that area. And the suspect obviously managed to somehow breach the security perimeter and drive into the park itself, which is quite extraordinary when you think about it.
Let's start with events last night in Berlin. We know at least one person's died, 16 injured after a van after a van was driven into a crowd during the city's gay pride festival. Police are currently searching for the driver, the occupant of an abandoned white van. It was driven into Tiergarten Park near the Brandenburg Gate, next to the parade route. The van hit several people and then a tree.
One person died of their wounds. Many of those hurt had life-threatening injuries. Berlin police have described it as a mass casualty incident. Bless you. The alleged perpetrator has been identified as a member of the city's Islamist scene, but has not yet been arrested, a police spokesman said overnight.
Well, we can speak now to Matthew Karnitsching, a reporter in Berlin. Matthew, good morning.
Good morning.
I know you were at the scene last night. Can you tell us how events unfolded?
Well, as is often the case with these things, it happens in a split second. This man allegedly drove his white van, it was a rented van, into the park itself. Now, for people who know Berlin, this is a major park in central Berlin, similar to Hyde Park in London or Central Park in New York. He drove onto a wide pedestrian path at a high speed. The question is how he managed to break through the police barriers that were there, and drove, as you said, into a group of people before hitting a tree, and then he jumped out of his vehicle and stabbed a number of people before fleeing. So far, they've only identified him as Abdul B, as is often the case in Germany. They didn't release his full surname, and they've just over the past hour or so, German media have shown a photograph of the suspect that they received from police. So a full-blown manhunt is on the way right now. There are literally thousands of police in central Berlin. This is around the Brandenburg Gate area, looking for the suspect.
Yeah, so there's this intensive manhunt. The search area is pretty broad. My understanding is it's the whole of Berlin.
Well, as it is in cases like this, they don't know where he is. There were a couple of 100,000 people attending the Christopher Street Day Parade yesterday in Berlin, so it would presumably be fairly easy for somebody to blend in and escape as people were exiting the parade last night, or ordered to go home effectively by the police. There is an underground obviously there in Berlin, so easy to move to other parts of the city. That said, they did the police did search the residence of the suspect, and he wasn't there. So the search continues this morning.
And give us an idea of the scale of this manhunt. There's one German newspaper reporting that over 2,000 police officers have been deployed already.
I think it's definitely all hands on deck in central Berlin. It's very difficult to go very far without bumping into a number of police officers. So they seem to have called everybody to duty overnight, and they are, it appears, leaving no stone unturned as they search for this man. The longer it takes, presumably the more difficult it will become. They haven't said whether he is German or from another country. There is a report that he was recently released from a youth detention center just in May. But that so far is all we know, and the photograph presumably should help identify him.
Yeah, and the suspect has been known to police previously.
Yes, they haven't released very many details. They've said that he is known, as you said at the beginning, as a member having some affiliation to what they described as the Islamist scene in Berlin, but we don't really know any more than that at this stage.
Yeah. Some of the wider context here. Germany has a recent history of incidents involving cars being driven into crowds, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, absolutely. There was just an incident a couple of months ago that this happens repeatedly. In most cases, there are not very many people who have been killed, fortunately, but there have been some horrific incidents, including one at a Christmas market a couple of years ago in Magdeburg in eastern Germany, where 6 people were killed when an Islamist drove his car into the market. And of course, in 2016, the first major incident of this sort, where another Islamist drove a lorry into a Christmas market in central Berlin, killing a dozen people. So this has unfortunately become a recurring theme in German life.
Yeah, and so you would expect with some urgency the government are looking at what measures can be put in place to sort of stop incidents like this. What have we heard from the German government?
Well, so far they have expressed shock and dismay over what happened, both at the local level and at the national level. I think it'll take some time before they get into a phase of trying to understand exactly how this happened. If the police could have done something to prevent this, it would seem at first glance that they didn't do a good enough job of securing the perimeter around this parade, which goes through central Berlin and shuts down much of the traffic in that area. And the suspect obviously managed to somehow breach the security perimeter and drive into the park itself, which is quite extraordinary when you think about it.
Matthew, thank you so much for your time. Matthew Karnitsching, Berlin reporter there. So just to sort of summarise, there's this manhunt underway right now. In a statement published on social media, Berlin police say they have identified a suspect who's a man who was known to police. They describe him as being associated with the Islamist spectrum. They've not made an arrest or suggested motive. The search is underway. We'll be checking back into Berlin routinely across this programme as that police search continues at pace.